It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Now, South Africa's leading palliative care organizations gathered for a conference last week from the 26th to the 29th of April in Cape Town, where a wide range of topics were discussed and where the theme was palliative care is everyone's business. Now, this morning, Melissa Williams-Platt runs Footprints for SAM, a charity that helps medical staff dealing with critically ill children to be better able to do their work by offering practical solutions for incredibly stressful jobs, as you can imagine. Now, Tracy Brand is a palliative care social worker, and both are with us this morning to discuss this very, I think, sensitive topic. Ladies, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
I'm glad we're talking about this. Just off air, we spoke very quickly that, I had the experience of my grandma that was in palliative care, and, as difficult as it was, I found new respect for the work that you guys do, because it's so much more than just caring for that specific person. It's the entire process, even after she passed away. The care that they took with regards to my family and making sure that everything was in place. So it is such a vital part of our industry. So thank you very much for unpacking this a little bit. I want to start with you, Tracy.
Yeah.
When we speak about palliative care, what exactly does that mean?
I think if you look at palliative care, it comes from the Latin word pallios, which means to cloak. And the idea is that it's from the moment of diagnosis to whatever the end of that illness is, whether it be recuperation or end of life. And it's about looking holistically at the patient and at the family. So as a palliative care team, we're looking at what are the physical symptoms, what are the emotional symptoms, what is the psychosocial stuff, the spiritual crisis, where do we fit culture in? And it's about, as a team, looking at addressing the needs, all of those needs of the patient and of the family.
And it is, like you say, it's such a wide scope of things that you are looking at, and that is why it is so important. And I think it gives just some peace of mind, Melissa, to families. So what exactly does it offer? I think I touched on it a little bit in the beginning, but from your side, what does it offer for families and those patients as well?
It's, our son, so maybe to give a bit of context, so Footprints for Sam is really the legacy of our son, Sam. And he was in hospital, born into hospital, and died in hospital. He never, ever went outside. So 15 and a half months in hospital. And I came from the corporate sector and then was in hospital every single day. And although we were in a private facility, so very privileged, I still was unheard, unseen, kind of pay the medical aid and don't have an opinion.
Sure.
And when we were questioning their trust and their ability, which was not what I was doing. I was just trying to be a mom, being accountable, making decisions for my son. And for me, Sam was our first child. So, all of our hopes and dreams were tumbled into an ICU isolation room. And we never knew from day to day if Sam would live. The first 3 months were really quite crazy. And I only got to hold him at 3 months. And had we had a palliative team, which was never offered to us, it would have been so different, because, as Trace said, palliation is about recognizing a chronic condition. So sometimes we don't wait and shouldn't wait for diagnosis, because in Sam's instance, he was only diagnosed about 2 or even a month before he died. So when a child is recognized as having complex symptoms, we need to have a multidisciplinary team that looks at not just the patient, in this instance, a baby. And remember, children can't necessarily tell you what's going on.
Exactly.
So as palliative specialists, we learn to really look at the whole person, mind, body, and soul. And with Sam's journey, as I said, it was privilege. So when he died at Red Cross Children's Hospital, we witnessed what other families were going through, and we thought, how do we make it different for them? How do we protect them as much as we can? Obviously, there are thousands of children, so we can't for everyone. But one of our big drives was advocacy, to say, how do we do things differently, and what is palliative care? So I was asked to talk at a conference, and I said, this is what medicine should look like. And everybody said, that's palliative care. And I said, no, that's death and dying. And they said, no, it's not.
Sure.
And as you witnessed, yes, sometimes it's end of life. But with children, it's often the trajectory of their illness. So they can live for years, but they have a chronic condition that needs a team to look after them.
Exactly, because like you rightly said, you're a mother and you still need to go out and you need to do your things, and you need to know that your child is in good, capable hands. And also, like you said, I mean, there's always room for improvement. I mean, yes, you guys are doing phenomenal work, and that's where the conference comes in. We'll touch on the conference in just a little bit. We'll be back with Melissa and Tracy in just a little bit. Thank you very much, ladies, for once again for joining us.
Thank you.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Right, we are back. Melissa Williams-Platt and Tracy Brand are still with us this morning as we continue on the topic of palliative care. Now, palliative care is meant to enhance a person's current care by focusing on quality of life for them and their family. Welcome back, ladies. Thank you very much. The conference, I want to speak about the palliative care conference. What do you feel are some of the key objectives that you could witness and see come to light out of this? Because we spoke about the fact that there's always room for improvement. How do we take this that came out of this conference and move forward and apply it in the real world, Tracy?
I think the interesting thing is, as you said, the theme was palliative care is everybody's business. And I think we have to start moving away from the fact that palliative care can only be provided by palliative care specialists. Palliative care is part of medicine, and what we looked at in the conference was how do we keep it to be relevant, inclusive, and sustainable. And as a World Health Organization country, we signed a resolution stating that as South Africa, we will incorporate palliative care in all levels of healthcare. So from your primary healthcare clinics through to your tertiary and quaternary hospitals. And I think people have come away with ideas of how do we now really enforce this resolution that we are part of, that we have got a plan for, and how do we get government to actually start saying it isn't just about end of life, it's about that kid in the clinic who's got a burn, they need palliative care. They need good pain control, they need good symptom control, they don't need the burn just to be treated.
And not just the medicine to try
and
and
not
make
just
it better.
the medicine. So it's about looking at how do we go away from the appendicitis in bed 5 to Ewan in bed 5 who has an appendicitis, and what does that mean?
And how do we deal with it holistically?
Exactly. It's not just dealing with his pain and the nausea and the vomiting. Is he worried about missing school? Is he worried about his, is his mom okay? And I think that those discussions were really vibrant, and it's about everybody now coming together and saying, right, how do we make this happen? How do we make government stand up and say, we need you, and we need you to do it with us, not just the NGOs going forward.
No, it's impossible.
It's impossible. There are only a few of us.
Yeah, there's only a few. And thank you for the few of you that's there. Melissa, I've got to ask you, I mean, I don't really like to refer back to it because it's been such a gripping part of our lives, but the pandemic.
Yes.
But if we look back at it, it did teach us a lot of lessons. What did you see come out of the whole pandemic, with regards to palliative care, where we are, and still what is needed?
Yeah. I think for everybody, and I'm a life coach by profession, and, everybody, I think it really raised the fact that life's not easy. And I think you've probably noticed since the pandemic, people are really struggling. And I think for me, what came out of the pandemic, and as an organization and working with Umduzuzi and other organizations like Patch, is we have to work together, because life is hard. And I think, the COVID brought up a lot of the cracks, and a lot of people don't know how to deal with that trauma and how to, kind of get through what happened. And medicine is exactly the same. So with health professionals, many of them were already at the kind of the end of the runway, and they weren't positioned necessarily to deal with death and dying. Patients were dying alone, and the stories and the grief and the loss that one's hearing now, there's so much kind of real, almost post-traumatic grief in terms of what's happened.
And if that was managed in a better, like we spoke about, a more holistic way, it could help with that healing.
So I think palliative care, in essence, as we've said, is about the whole person. And I often get into trouble when I say this, but it's really just good medicine. And we have to teach medicine differently, because as Tracy said, the handful of us out there, and the NGOs are so good at collaborating, but we need to train the students. And how do we choose medical students? Because it's not just about IQ, it's also about EQ.
EQ, which is sometimes, the more important factor.
Exactly. Absolutely. What do you remember? So with Sam's journey, I remember the harsh words that were said to us. And I always say, when I speak to medical students and we train them about communication and breaking really difficult news, and I don't like the word difficult, maybe challenging and hard, we have to have those hard conversations. Because when you hear that a patient is dying and they didn't know they were dying, that's not okay. And the family's left with whiplash because how did my family member die without me knowing? How did my loved one die without me saying goodbye? And as I said earlier, it's not about death and dying, but it is part of it.
And it puts a lot of stress on the family members, you know, looking in, you know, trying to care for that patient. I just quickly want to ask you, Tracy, you know, for somebody that's maybe in a stage of their life now where a loved one or a family member, you know, needs palliative care, but that's also currently pursuing active treatment, you know, for an ailment. Is this still an option?
Absolutely, and I think that's the misnomer. Everybody goes, oh, they're in palliative care, so they're dying, you know. And if you look at the pattern of medicine, in the past it used to be we go curative, 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 palliative, you know, because now there's nothing left to do.
It's the little end bit.
That's the little end bit. So the new model is we refer to it as a bow tie. So the curative is big and the palliative is small. And then as cure doesn't become an option, so the cure gets smaller and the palliative gets bigger. And it's about that dovetail of medicine. It doesn't matter where you are in the trajectory of your illness, you should be getting palliative care. The goals of care change as things progress. So as we've gone through every treatment option and cure isn't becoming a possibility, so now our goals of care are, okay, we're not looking at cure. What we're looking at now is how do we give you the best quality of life with the quantity you have left? And it's about treating the pain, the symptoms other than pain, that holistic spiritual journey that you as a family and a patient are going on. And having those difficult discussions, and I think that's what the pandemic also brought out, was that people weren't having the discussions about what do you want? Do you want to be ventilated? Or would you rather just be comfortable and at home? And I think that made medical professionals and families sit up and go, crikey, we have to have these conversations. And I think that's where curative and palliative work together is when do we start changing our conversation? When do we start having those difficult, hard conversations about what I want?
And that is what's needed. It's not an easy subject to talk about, but it is so needed. And again, hats off to you and everyone in your field that is doing the most to, I think, secure a better light for palliative care, not only in South Africa, but I think worldwide as well. We're going to be back with Melissa and Tracy in just a bit.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Now, Melissa Williams-Platt and Tracy Brand are still with us this morning as we wrap up our discussion on palliative care. Now, a palliative care team is made up of multiple different professionals that work with the patient, the family, and the patient's other doctors to provide medical, social, emotional, and practical support. And again, you see how important this palliative care is. Now, Melissa, I want to start with you. Your organization, Footprints for Sam, helps medical staff deal with critically ill children. How do you do that? What's the process?
Okay. So it's kind of one of the legs that we do, but there it's very much about giving them a platform, because we talked about emotional wellness earlier, and kind of a framework to understand what palliative medicine is. So to help them have those conversations and to, where Tracy talked about kind of that bow tie, that the clinical is key, but often, how often do you hear them saying, we can't do anything else? And the family just is absolutely distraught.
Yeah.
So teaching them to have the conversation that we can, because even if that is a beautiful death, that is being active.
Absolutely.
And that is giving a family a choice and a child. You know, often a child, they know they're dying, but the parents still have to play catch up. And I'll never forget when Sam was dying, one of the doctors, she's a professor, amazing woman, said to me, Melissa, you have to tell Sam that it's okay. It's okay to go. And who can say that to their child? But as soon as I did, he was able to let go. So those conversations are so hard. So I help them have those conversations.
Yeah.
And they can practice on me, you know. So we do role playing for exams, and they'll ask me. I'll say, just ask me the questions that you were terrified to ask someone before, and I'll be able to give you that feedback. There might be tears. Don't hug me, but I'll be okay, because if I can change one medical professional to be able to have the conversations we were not allowed to have, and know that it's just a question. I'm not questioning you and your ability.
Yeah.
It's just a question. to learn that compassionate, empathic approach sets you up for success.
It becomes so apparent how important this is. I mean, especially for parents.
Yeah.
And immediately my thoughts go out to everyone. I mean, I've been to the Red Cross War Memorial, Children's Hospital, where you see these children, and like you rightly said, some of them know that they are not going to make it. And having those discussions, it takes emotional intelligence from the medical staff to facilitate that with the parents and the doctors and making sure the child's okay. I got to ask you as well, we know that the palliative care is different when it comes to, children and adults, but what are, in your mind, the common misconceptions around palliative care that people still walk around with, that you can dispel for us right here?
I think the biggest is that palliative care means you're dying. It's end of life.
Yeah,
And
put you in a facility and that's it.
yeah, and it's not. It's as we've been saying, it's right from that point, maybe even before diagnosis, as in Sam's case, but right from the point where you're dealing with a life-threatening, life-limiting illness, is how do we do what's best for that child? And, for Melissa and Fred, it would have been to enable Sam to actually go home. And he might not have lived 15 months, but he would have had the time with him at home, not stuck to 1,000,001 machines where you couldn't be
Where he was
parents.
he could be his own environment.
Exactly. And I think that is, when working with children, it's about helping parents make those difficult decisions of there's nothing more we can do curatively. So do you want to stay in hospital and your child potentially dies in hospital? Or would you like to take your child home? And we can help you manage their symptoms. And this is what you could expect is going to happen in terms of what their illness is and as the disease progresses. And probably 98% of parents will say, I'm going home.
Yeah.
But the paternalistic nature of medicine doesn't allow families to have that discussion. And so they feel the need, I've got to stay in hospital. We've got to do more treatment.
That's the way it's done.
Because that's the way it's done. And it's just about having that different conversation about what do you want? Oh, but don't I have to stay? No. If you really don't want the treatment anymore, if you honestly believe the treatment isn't helping and is making your child more sick, and the child wants to be at home and you want to be at home and you want the support, let's go.
Melissa, I want to end off then with you. How do we start those conversations, whether or not it is with the doctors, the hospital, your child that might need palliative care? What advice could you give to, I want to focus maybe on parents, right now?
I think for everybody is to have the courage to have a voice. You need to stand up for your child. And they go, but what if they take it out on my child or on me? That is the standard response. And we have to shift medicine to say that this is about a team, and the parent and the child is part of that team. Because as a parent, you don't hand over your rights. This is my child, now I'm just going to stand in the back.
And you feel that you need to just listen to what everyone is saying to you.
I was in a private institution and I didn't know my rights. And I remember walking into Rahima Musa Mother and Child Hospital. They've been in the press a lot. We do a lot of work there. And as you walk up the stairs, there's the patient rights right there, right to a second opinion. And we weren't allowed to have a second opinion. And I was, as I said, privileged, and it was still such a struggle. So we need to encourage compassion, kindness, generosity, curiosity, and know that we all are in it, what for? The best interest of the patient. That's all it's about. It's not about egos. It's not about you. No. It's about the patient and their quality of life. So in Sam's instance, there were other ways that he could have lived quite a good life, but we weren't given those options because the doctors wouldn't say that actually we don't know and we need a second opinion. So we could sit here all morning.
I'm sure.
But it's such an important topic. And I think to end off really, it's about collaboration and it's about reaching out because the NGO sector, the funding is a problem for palliative medicine.
Melissa, Tracy, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I think our viewers took some valuable advice out there. As difficult as it is to have these discussions, they need to be had.
They do.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So lovely meeting you.
Lovely meeting you.
Pleasure.